Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You could find me on Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Today we're going to be talking about the Netflix Octopus murders, the cover-up of reporter's death, and CIA crimes he threatened to expose. We also had Mr. Kuzmarov on the show about warmonger, how the Clintons' malign foreign policy launched the U.S. trajectory from Bush 2 to Biden. And I just played a repeat last night, I just remembered. About was the CIA behind Jonestown. Mr. Kuzmarov, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming back, especially with all this controversy going on. Remind the audience, though, who is Jeremy Kuzmarov?
Well, I'm a historian by training, and I work as the managing editor of Covert Action magazine, which tries to expose covert action and was founded by a CIA whistleblower.
All right, good old Philip Agee. Remind the audience about your book, Warmonger.
Yeah, I just published a book. It's called Warmonger, How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Launched the U.S. Trajectory from Bush 2 to Biden, published by Clarity Press. And it looks at the history of Clinton, including his connection with the CIA going back to his time as a student at Oxford in the 1960s, and his role as governor of Arkansas and overseeing clandestine CIA operations into Nicaragua and Central America, and then how that played out in this presidency where you had this kind of phony liberal who basically recalibrated the warfare state and promoted these humanitarian pretexts for war, and was a turning point, I argue, in American history at the end of the Cold War.
Yeah, so true, man. And then we had Obama, had the same type of wolf in sheep's clothing, and Biden, too, as well.
Exactly. He set the groundwork, yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel? Encouraged, discouraged? What do you think about all our political landscape out there?
I can't say I'm encouraged, no. It's pretty bad. I mean, it's totally bleak. You have two right-wing parties, essentially. You have warmongers throughout the Congress and government. I mean, people have to fight back more because they're just screwing us over and screwing a lot of the world over.
It's funny for the audience. We're taping this at 12 noon on a Friday, and I just told Jeremy a minute ago about Marjorie Taylor Greene filing a motion to vacate the Speaker of the House. Utter chaos in the House right before their break. It's just craziness out there. All these Trump lawsuits. But with that as a background, why don't you tell us about this Netflix series? There's an article here in covertactionmagazine.com. Netflix series on the Octopus murders continues. Cover-up of reporter's death and CIA crimes he threatened to expose. Covertactionmagazine.com has done work on the Octopus story for years. Many articles on there. Why don't you first tell us, what is the Octopus story for people that don't know? And then we'll get into this recent Netflix.
Okay. Well, a lot of it centers on this journalist named Danny Casolaro, who is investigating, CIA corruption, and this a secret team of the CIA who allegedly stole some computer software from Bill Hamilton, who is had worked for the NSA, and he developed his own company, and he had this computer software that was being marketed to law enforcement agencies so they can track legal cases, and his company was thrust into bankruptcy by the Department of Justice. and he believed that the software was stolen by the CIA, and there were a lot of evidence emerged in court cases to validate his suspicions and his claims. And they used that software for money laundering operations at banks and for surveillance. And it was a network of CIA operatives around George H.W. Bush, Theodore Shackley, and elements involved in the Iran-Contra affair like Oliver North and Richard Secord, who were among those to use this software for money laundering and criminal activities and drug laundering, including in banks. And there's a bank, the Nugan Bank in Australia, that was used for that purpose, and BCCI. And these operatives were involved in kind of systemic criminality in the name of national security. And Castellaro was kind of onto them, and then he got killed. What many people believe he was murdered, although it was claimed he committed suicide. But this was in 1991. And then a new generation of researchers have kind of tried to pick up the story and see what really Castellaro knew, what information he had, what he was going to publish in the book that he was allegedly going to publish before he died. And they've added new layers of information to the story. And Bill Hamilton is still around. He's also continues to investigate and try and relay to the public how he was screwed over and how corrupt these elements were and still are.
One of the most fascinating things Hamilton told me was that the software was being used to track overseas wire transfers, and then they could use that information to blackmail powerful people, rich people, politicians and stuff. And that a big use of this PROMIS software from what was it called? The core, the main core, he called it, portion of the NSA, was being used for blackmail and extortion. But that wasn't mentioned on Netflix, was it?
No, there was a lot that wasn't mentioned on Netflix. It was sold also to a lot of foreign governments who used it for their own nefarious purposes. Including the Israeli, and we have some Israelis who came out and said. I think one was Israeli whistleblower like Ari Ben Menash talked about it. It was also sold to the Australian government, allegedly, by Rupert Murdoch and some of his companies. And Australia, was key to some of the money laundering operations. It became a major hub in the drug trade. And Nugan Bank was a bank set up by veterans of the CIA secret war in Laos for drug and money laundering purposes. And there was a secret spy facility at Pine Gap, Australia, that was very important to larger operations. And the Octopus, according to Castellaro's research, according to Peter Osborne, who's an Australian researcher who's uncovered a lot into these networks, Castellaro had extensive information about a coup that the Octopus was involved in Australia against the Gow Whitlam government, which was trying to close the Pine Gap spy base and, crack down, I think, on the Nugan Bank, as well as pursue more independent foreign policy for Australia. And he was overthrown in the 1975 coup. And there was a royal commission being set up in Australia that Castellaro actually was, prior to his death, he had plans to travel to Australia and meet with members of this parliamentary commission that was investigating CIA activities in Australia, and ultimately did expose a lot about it.
Well, Jeremy, let me ask you this. Then what is the problem if this Netflix documentary is exposing all this new information about the Octopus and PROMIS and all stuff? What is the problem with the documentary?
Well, the one good thing is that the documentary, people who may not have been aware of the Castellaro story are now aware of it. So that's good. But it's a misleading film because they haven't done actually any original research of their own or uncover anything that's new. And then at the end, kind of the first three, the premise of the film is that, there's a suspicious death of Danny Castellaro. and it smells bad, and we're going to try and expose the truth all these years later. And the first couple episodes feature this guy named Christian Hansen, who had been a New York Times reporter, and he claimed that he got obsessed with this case and stopped working for the New York Times so he could pursue this full time. And it kind of looks like he's really going to dig into it and solve the murder, but then he kind of backtracks and turns on his sources. Like in the last episode, he turns on Bill Hamilton, because he allegedly found one of Hamilton's source on one. Hamilton was trying to investigate the application of the PROMIS software that was stolen from his company and that he developed. And the film makes Hamilton seem like he's on a wild goose chase, and that he relied on a woman who wrote, got information in the bowling alley. Yeah. But that was just one source. I mean, Bill Hamilton is a very intelligent guy who's researched extensively and relied on many different sources and unearthed a lot of important information about how the PROMIS software was used. So, not as any researcher knows, not every lead turns up good, but that's not the fault of the researcher. If one lead, turns bad, or one source is uncredible in one particular facet of the research, but he kind of uses that to make the audience, to make it seem like Hamilton is just crazy and on a wild goose chase and doesn't know what he's doing, when in fact he'd been exonerated in court, and the court ruled that he was a victim of a nefarious conspiracy, and his case was taken. His lawyer was Elliot Richardson, the famous Watergate lawyer, who had a great reputation for integrity, which is rare in Washington, but this was a guy who really had a great reputation, and he said that this was worse than Watergate. And Hamilton is very meticulous, kind of scholarly in the way he approaches this. So the film was this kind of a hatchet piece against Hamilton and other whistleblowers who came out with insider information about the working of the Octopus, like Michael Riconasuto, who helped modify the PROMIS software for the CIA, working under William Casey, and then was put in jail for 25 years on what many believe was trumped-up drug charges. And he has a lot of knowledge and information, but the film kind of dismisses him as a crackpot. And then at the end, it just says, oh, well, there's only one person in the room that could have killed Danny, and that was Danny. But there's a huge amount of forensic evidence that points to Danny being murdered, notably that his wrists were so badly slashed, 2 wrists, so he could not have held the knife with one wrist to slash the other because they were so badly slashed. And then there was somebody, there was blood, like a towel, outside the bathtub, and a person who worked at the hotel witnessed somebody leaving the room, and this person looked like Joseph Cuellar, who's one of the leading suspects, who's known to work for the CIA, and had met with Danny the days before. And there's other crime scene evidence that points to a murder that the film just kind of whitewashes and wants us to believe that it was a suicide and people are paranoid, who investigate the CIA corruption. But we know so much that the CIA, unfortunately, is a very corrupt entity, and that the Octopus has engaged in corrupt activity that have already been exposed, very extensive corruption, including by this Australian commission that exposed its involvement in money laundering with the Nugan Bank. And that's one part of the information Castellaro is going to write about in his book. And the film made it seem like, Danny became depressed because he couldn't publish his book, and he didn't, his trail led cold. But in fact, we know that Castellaro had important documents. He even had checks that he unearthed from illegal arms deals in Lebanon and connected with the Iran-Contra affair. So he actually had the hard evidence. He was going to Australia to meet with the government commission. This was not some, crackerjack commission. These were high-level government officials who had hard evidence of corruption involved in the Nugan Bank and corruption within the Australian government connected with the CIA. So he had the evidence, and he was excited about publishing his book. And there even evidence that there were filmmakers interested in making a film about it. So it would have been really well publicized these networks would have been exposed for their corruption, and they would have been sent to prison, and that's why he was murdered.
It's so true. Just from personal experience, I can tell you, when you're on something like this and you're pursuing something like this, it's so much bigger than you.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
It's so much bigger than everybody around you, like Castellaro was. If you were suicidal, if you were suffering from depression, you wouldn't still be working on it. You wouldn't be in a motel room someplace working on it. You'd be home in your bed, under the covers for a month. You know what I mean? The idea that, he'd be pursuing this huge thing and then just in the middle of the night, just, that's it, I'm done. That's not how depression works. Yeah.
Yeah, he just gives up and kills himself, even though when he has all this, like he's reached the pinnacle
with a suitcase full of documents right there. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and he was going to be giving it to John Kerry because John Kerry, in his early days, he sold out after that. But there was a period when Kerry, I think, was trying to do the right thing, and he was heading this commission to investigate Iran-Contra and BCCI Bank, and Castellaro had all these documents, including checks, that he was going to be presenting to John Kerry and his congressional committee. So this was getting out to the public, and that creates a clear motive for him being murdered. And everyone around him said Castellaro was not at all depressed. He was the kind of guy who loved life, and he was a brilliant journalist. He can be a model for journalists today. In his amazing and courageous investigation that was really uncovering serious corruption.
We still talk about today, yeah. So, and another thing too is, William Hamilton sent me an affidavit by a fellow named William Turner about the death of Alan Standorf, who was an NSA employee who gave documents to Castellaro and who had access to the main core, the highest top secret areas of NSA data storage there. And he was maybe he was suicidal too, because he was found beaten to death in the back of his car, left at an airport. So maybe he beat himself to death as part of another suicide. There's a pattern of suicides in this story.
Yeah, exactly. You see a pattern of clearly suspicious deaths of whistleblowers with who have firsthand knowledge of serious malfeasance that will put people to jail for the rest of their life. Very powerful people. We've seen enough movies to know what really happened.
Yeah, and hundreds of millions of dollars, but by very serious guys. All these guys are serious people. Iran-Contra types, these are serious guys. And you mentioned Elliot Richardson. We all know Elliot Richardson as the hero of Watergate, the Saturday Night Massacre. But this guy was a Secretary of Defense. This guy was a Harvard Law Review. His father was a Harvard Law professor. This is a guy with a deep D.C. insider, and he's not just pushing around papers for Hamilton. This guy dove into this case. He's writing letters to Joe Biden when Joe Biden was head of the Judiciary Committee in Washington, and Joe Biden is sending back a fake response. I got all this in my interview with Hamilton. A forged response from LeGrand, the head investigator for Joe Biden, who lost his job after that. And you talk about Rakana Shudo, too. Rakana Shudo got arrested 2 weeks after supplying an affidavit for Hamilton. Okay? All this stuff traces right back to Hamilton and Rakana Shudo, not off to some Indian reservation and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I've been working with Hamilton too. Yeah, because I did an article and I discussed some of this. Yeah, and Hamilton, he always gives you his sort, where he got the information that he got. He'll send you the documents. He'll tell you, try and interview this person to corroborate anything he's saying that might be, controversial. So, he's really, he's the real deal. He follows all the correct methodologies and he gives you the documentation. And, the court sided with him. Judge Batson, this got to federal court and it stated explicitly he had been defrauded in a massive criminal scheme involving trickery, fraud, and deceit. Although then that judge was removed. It goes to show how corrupt the judiciary has become, is that when that honest ruling came down and this judge was removed in favor of some kind of flaky who didn't pursue the case further. So, and then there was a congressman who was pursuing it, a Democrat from Texas. His name, I forget his name off the top of my head, but then he was. There were some powerful elements that made sure he was not reelected, and the case once he was not reelected, the case, the congressional investigation stopped. But I know, Biden was very key in squelching it, and Biden, even forged a letter. So it's totally unprinted. It shows the character of him.
Yeah, and then LeGrand gets fired a couple of weeks after that and run out of town,
Yeah.
It's funny, too. I hate to interrupt. I get so upset about this whole situation here. But they also portray Hamilton as being so naive as this woman with this bowling alley story, that he's so inept that he's misled to believe that her husband might be CIA, which he is. I don't know if he is or not. But the thing is, Hamilton tells me a story about how he and his wife, through a mutual friend, were able to pass along some reports and documents to George Tenet, the CIA director. Okay. It's not like this is some clueless guy sitting at home with a podcast. You know what I mean? This is an insider's insider, man. And then he's got Elliot Richards in there, a point man for him. They're just outrageous, this whole portrayal of Hamilton.
Yeah, and he's the most meticulous guy. Right?
Right.
He's incredibly scrupulous with all his research and documentation. We don't even know if that story is real. I think he has other evidence, because that was related to the use of PROMIS software in nuclear submarines, and I think he's got a lot of evidence of that. So this woman is totally inconsequential in general, but they make it seem like she, disproves all the research he's done.
Well, yeah, which is such a bold move, man. Why they would pull off that? You can probably think of something else to discredit reconnaissance in Hamilton besides this housewife type, who just happens to be all dressed up waiting to go on TV when they knock on her door. And just think, man, Jeremy, you're around this kind of stuff. I'm around this kind of stuff. Someone knocks at your door and says, hey, Bill Hamilton, we're kind of shooting. The first thing you're gonna reach for your gun. The first thing it's dead bodies all over this joint. You're gonna smile and say, oh yeah, let's talk. Give me a break.
So, exactly. I mean, what are the motives? And usually they're going to demand some money. But, apparently, I think there's evidence that, I have to double check this, but I don't know if there's an intelligence connection in her family, maybe her husband, because it kind of looks, as you say, it looks totally staged. And in general, the film is kind of a setup. So you wonder about the background. It would require more investigation into Trites and Henson's background. What was their motive in making this film? Was it just to play off the current mood where, conspiracy theorists have to be demonized? Or, where do they get their funding, and what role do intelligence agencies have in this production? I don't know the answer, but...
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned the bowling alley. That she got her information at this bowling alley with napkins. You mentioned it in your article. You just mentioned it here in the interview. And it's one of the things that sticks in my head, too. And the reason for that is because these filmmakers went to the length to go to a bowling alley and film B-roll footage that they could then insert later on. So that it's implanted in our heads. She got this from a bowling alley. You know what I mean? So that's not by accident, man. So no, but what do you think the motivation is? Because I've been talking to Osborne too as well, and he talks about the chain of custody of all these documents and these boxes going on and this material. What do you make of the motivation behind this and the chain of custody in this material?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know for sure. I have to be careful not to accuse anybody of anything where I don't have absolute proof. But, I mean, what it looks like is just some kind of, limited hangout or attempt. I mean, more and more people are onto this story. More evidence has come to light. There's calls to reopen the case. I mean, I know Trey Casolaro, the son of Danny, had been active in trying to get the case reopened. He's teamed up with researchers like Peter Osborne, who've unearthed a huge amount of new information in the case, both in the case in the murder of Casolaro and in the operation of the Octopus. that Castellaro knew about. So I think they see the writing in the wall that they're losing the narrative, so they have to try and discredit the whistleblowers and try and revitalize this idea that Castellaro committed suicide. Although who really believes? I mean, even after watching this film, I think most people would still believe that he was murdered, because there's even some evidence presented at the beginning of the film that would suggest that. And even, some people are interviewed, like in the first episode. And I think most people these days are suspicious. They've seen this happen before. Yeah. They've seen a lot of movies, and the government has just lost its credibility. So they have to really strain to try and denounce any critical, whether whistleblower or journalists who are critical. They have their tactic is to try and smear them, and that's what this film, the approach of this film, basically.
Yeah, I've had this experience with Netflix in the past. They did a series about Maurice Terry, the author of The Ultimate Evil, and I was actually in touch with the producers beforehand, years beforehand. I gave all my shows on the topic and phone numbers, get in contact with people thinking they were going to do a real job. Same exact pattern. The first 3 episodes, everything's cool. The last episode, hit job, So... who knows?
Yeah, I mean, they did. The one that seemed pretty good was Wormwood, about the Frank Olson case, and it was the Sons. Did you see that?
I don't think I did. No.
Oh, you should watch that. That seemed to be an exception. Maybe, I don't know, they learned from that and somebody told them that went too far, because that was about the Frank Olson case, this CIA whistleblower who was involved with germ warfare development at Fort Detrick, Maryland, and he committed suicide by jumping out of a New York hotel, like the 20th floor or something. And then the CIA later admitted that they had drugged him with LSD, although his son began investigating Eric Olson, who was a very bright guy, and he found that he had been murdered, and that LSD was just a cover story. Yeah, they may have drugged him, but they felt that he was a security risk because he was threatening to blow the whistle about germ warfare development at Fort Detrick, and their allegation that they used germ warfare in the Korean War that they've been denying for 70 years, although there's more and more evidence that the government actually used germ warfare in Korea, and Frank Olson would have revealed this, so they had to kill him. And the film doesn't go much into the germ warfare aspect, but it does feature Eric Olson, the son, and it kind of gives credence to his investigation much more so than this film about Danny Castellaro. So I would say, yeah, that film was,
and that was
much
Netflix.
More critical. That was Netflix, yeah. It was made by a well-known, I think it was Errol Morris, who's a well-known filmmaker. And this was maybe 5 or 6 years ago now. So, yeah. So I guess they're capable of some good films.
Or at least at one time they were, like you said, like John Carey.
Yeah. But things may have shifted because we've seen, like, the media is totally... I think at one point... I mean, probably more years ago, there was some space in the mainstream media for the occasional critical article or two, but now, no way. Like, things have gotten really bad in the last 4 or 5 years, I would say.
Yeah, and it seems also so, too, like in the alternative podcast movement, too, that a lot of suspicious people, again, too, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you going to do, man?
Yeah.
Now, is there any articles in Covert Action Magazine about this Frank Olson story with Wormwood?
Yes. Well, I did an article about Frank Olson, and it's been republished a couple times. It's called, I think, the title of the article is "There's Something Rotten in Denmark," because the hotel concierge, he was the one to first see Frank Olson. He was thrown out of the hotel, and he crashed on the sidewalk, and it was a grisly scene that he came up on. And then his name was Armand Pastor, and he was actually featured in Unsolved Mysteries. That's where I got the title, because and that used to be a great show. Unsolved Mysteries would actually go into these cases, and they would interview a lot of people, and they did, I think, a very objective job. You don't see that anywhere in the mainstream media anymore. And yeah, they interviewed Pastor because when he went up to to the room Olson had stayed in. Olson's roommate was a guy named Robert Lashbrook, who was also in the CIA, and he claimed he only woke up after Olson, crashed through the window and he heard a sound. But it didn't look right, and it didn't sound right what Lashbrook was saying. And actually, he didn't first call the police. He called Sidney Gottlieb, who was the CIA's Dr. Death, and they had a recording at the hotel that before he called the police, because in those days every phone call went through to some hotline, and they had him calling Sidney Gottlieb, like saying he's gone instead of calling the police. So Armand Pastor is like, there's something rotten in Denmark, and that's the title. And he told Unsolved Mysteries that. And that was the title of my article.
I can't encourage people enough to check out covertactionmagazine.com. John Potash, who's a friend of the show, we've known him for years and years. He writes there all the time. He just hooked me up with a fellow, Dr. Muhammad, who's going to be coming on our show telling his story as well. Excellent content there at covertactionmagazine.com. You can subscribe, and you can even buy the historical paper copies, the magazines that they used to have back in the 70s and the 80s when I was a kid. We'd see around WBAI headquarters and stuff. What about, I was talking to Osborne, and he's very concerned about the chain of custody with this material, Casolara's material, and other material boxes, we keep calling it, these file boxes all over the place. This woman, Anne Clank, appears to obtain some of this material from Casolara's home after his death.
Yes, that I think Peter told me about that, and yeah, Clank is featured very prominently in this Netflix film as some kind of authority. But Peter, is very close with Trey Casolaro,
right,
the son of Danny Casolaro, and knows, had access to his diaries and knows more than anybody about him. Said that Casolaro didn't trust this woman, and I think there's evidence from a friend of his that she took documents from the home without authorization, and I don't know where these documents are today. And Peter Osborne also unearthed that Clank had worked for Earl Bryan, was a Reagan official who was involved in the theft of the PROMIS software from Bill Hamilton that was then used for the CIA for nefarious activity. And she was a producer with Jack Anderson in his radio show, and he was this Washington Post columnist. And the radio network that Anderson's show was on was the Financial News Network, which was owned by Earl Bryan, who was a Reagan official whose company stole the PROMIS software and was implicated in court cases. So she appears to be compromised, but of course the film doesn't tell you this, and she's like an authority who's very skeptical of the murder story and skeptical of Casolaro's research, and said she tried to warn him or something. So this is very misleading, and there's a blatant conflict of interest there, and it's not reported.
Yeah, refresh my memory. Earl Bryan was the one who supposedly he was given the software deal as, I guess, a payoff or a gift, quid pro quo, over the Iran-Contra.
That was somebody else.
Somebody else? Okay, sorry.
No. Sorry, you're right. Yeah, okay. I think Earl Bryan. Yeah, he was given it. He was involved in the October surprise. Yeah, because
that's what I meant. October surprise. I apologize.
Yeah, I was confused because there are a lot of names, so it gets confusing. But
it's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's right. Because he was with Reagan all the way back when Reagan was governor of California. He was like the health. Had a health portfolio, I think, in the state government in California, and then he was always with Reagan, and he was involved in the October surprise where they, the mission to delay the hostages being released after hostages were taken following the Iranian Revolution, because Reagan wanted Carter to look bad in the election, that he couldn't get these hostages freed, and he was compromising national security, and was a weak leader, and he was going to free them, but there was bribery involved, and Bryan did that dirty work for Reagan, so he got rewarded with the software, and it was his company. He had set up a company whose name I'd have to look up, but that company was the one that took control of the PROMIS software.
Yeah, there's so many names. There's so many names involved in this that we all recognize, just to keep track of those. And then there's these more obscure folks that are out there. What a crazy crazy story, man. I don't think it's ever going to end.
Yeah.
Now, have you spoken to Riconosciuto?
No, I've never spoken to him. From what I heard, he was very upset about this film, but I don't know, because he was portrayed so negatively. When I mean, his account has always, I think, been corroborated, much like Bill Hamilton, and he's really a brilliant guy, and there's no reason to question his integrity, but he's portrayed very poorly in this film, so I don't know how it's affected him.
Right, and let's not forget,
he spent years and years in prison. Yeah,
27 years, which is no joke. And the other thing too is the guy was arrested 2 weeks after providing an affidavit to Hamilton. You know, it's coincidence has happened. You know?
Yeah,
but not with this
exactly.
bunch we're dealing with. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely, and the sentence was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, he was given more than murderers and rapists for allegedly some minor drug violations. So, something, you know, what a horrible injustice for a man to spend a quarter century of the best years of his life in prison simply because he's a truth teller is just terrible.
What do you know? I was told a story. About Casalaro's girlfriend was supposed to go with him, but she was given some money by Saudis to attend a different event and wasn't down there at that motel with him. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I would recommend Peter Osborne, this Australian. He had an experience somewhat similar to Hamilton, because he had developed his own software and encryption company, and it was operating independent of the CIA, and he had it stolen from him in a CIA operation Stillpoint, and he had been working even with the United Nations, and that ruined him financially. He had been a science advisor in the Australian government, so because of that experience, he researched this for years and worked with Bill Hamilton. And he has a website called The Sixth Eye that listeners can go to. And he presents a lot of the evidence. And like Hamilton, you know, he doesn't just say something, he'll present documents and evidence to back up what he's saying. And a lot of that is presented in in these podcasts. So, and he unearthed documents. Well, yeah, these checks that Casolaro had, and evidence about. Yeah, I think her name was Wendy Sherman. She was Casolaro, I believe, not Sherman, but Wendy something. Although I have to double check the name. But she was promised $10,000 by the Kuwaiti royal family. I think they invited her to stay in the Watergate Hotel because I think they wanted to keep her away from Casolaro, and he has evidence of this. And Osborne research has pointed to, I mean, his research is valuable for the study of recent American history and the Iran-Contra scandal, which is a major scandal in American history. And his research showed the important role played by the Kuwaiti royal family in the Iran-Contra affair, which previously I don't think was very well known. And that was who paid off Casolaro's girlfriend. And I don't know if they stole documents for her or threatened her or what, but I know they put her up in the Watergate Hotel to isolate her from Casolaro, and they were very much involved in Iran-Contra and tied in with the Octopus. It even has implications as far as understanding that the Persian Gulf War and provocation that Kuwait carried out against Saddam Hussein, including allegedly they had set up with the Octopus's help certain horizontal drilling techniques to steal Iraq's oil. You know, and we were told it was unfettered Iraqi aggression in Kuwait, but Kuwait was actually, with the help of the Octopus, stealing Iraq's oil. Yeah,
they were drilling underneath Iraq. They were from the side.
Yeah, so that triggered the crisis that led to the Persian Gulf War and the 30-year American involvement in Iraq that's been disastrous for Iraq and caused who knows how many millions of deaths and destruction of the environment. So the implications of some of these policies are just horrific, and that's why Americans ought to be attuned to these networks that basically hijack, in many ways, government policy while making huge amounts of money themselves.
Yeah, the Peter Osborne website is the sixth THESIXTHEYE.org. And no one ever talks about this girlfriend Wendy. No, I've been talking about Octopus for years. I've never heard anybody mention a story about Watergate and Wendy there. Do you have I know you cite in your previous article here, the one in covertactionmagazine.com called, scroll up to the top quickly, CIA, a Netflix series on the Octopus murders continues CIA cover-up of reporter's death and CIA crimes he threatened to expose by Jeremy Kuzmarov. You cite him as a source. Do you have an upcoming interview scheduled with him?
With who? With Peter
Osborne, yeah.
Yes. Well, he's helped me. I've developed a series of articles with his help because, he's really a great authority on this. He's carried out original research with a team of researchers over 2 decades. So, he's the real expert. So I would defer to his expertise. But he's helped me in writing several articles, based on his research that I've been able to verify, including if listeners go to my article, they can see on the bottom links to Osborne's website and to, I think, 4 of the articles I developed that were written with the help of Peter and the research he's done and the documents he's provided me, including on the coup in Australia. And this is stuff that Casolaro had been investigating and was going to write about in his book. And I don't know if he had everything that Peter has added a new layer of detail on these topics, and includes involvement in the Lockerbie bombing in 1988. There was a terrible airplane crash, and Osborne has evidence drawn from Casolaro's some of his research that the CIA may have been behind this secret team, and that there were some DIA agents who had uncovered a illegal drug operation in Lebanon run by the CIA, and they were going to report on this on Washington and expose the CIA criminal led by Theodore Shackley and Robert Booth Nichols, who's featured in the film. And there's evidence that they were involved in downing this airline and killing 270 people. So this goes just how far they would go to protect themselves and to protect their terrible secrets they carry with them.
Yeah, we see this same cast of characters. A.J. Weberman went to testify against the Portuguese Parliament about Frank Sturgis being involved in a plane crash over there, a bombing of a plane over there that I think went after the prime minister and stuff. So these characters were involved in stuff all over the world, sometimes on their own project, personal projects and stuff going over there. One of the things that Peter Osborne told me was this Anne Clank had worked for the Clinton Department of Justice too. Are you aware of that?
No, I think she, he believed as a reward for her service that she was appointed as Clinton's speechwriter during his campaign, one of his campaigns. I think either the first one or the second one.
Okay, and then also too, he says that he has some emails between Sherry Seymour and Riconosciuto's attorneys about the return of some documents.
Yes, you'd have to ask him about that. I believe there's unfolding legal case. From my understanding, that because Sherry Seymour wrote a book on Danny Casolaro, published with Shrine Day, and she was featured in the film and was interviewed in a Netflix film. And there are allegations that she got some documents from Michael Riconosciuto, and they've given them to the filmmakers. And I don't know if Michael gave her the permission, the accusation that she didn't have the permission to give those documents to the filmmakers. But I believe there may be litigation surrounding that, so I don't want to.
Yeah, and I hear you. Neither do I.
I don't want to face a lawsuit or something.
No, I was just wondering if you saw the emails, because Peter said he had the emails. I never saw them. So I wonder if you saw them.
Well, yeah, Peter has. He always backs up what he says with documentation, so I know that from working with him.
Right. Okay. What do you make now of the reception of this this documentary amongst the alternative, normally anti-CIA community? What do you make? It seems like a lot of guys are just falling for this. Well,
I think so. Yeah, it breeds suspicion. If they're, genuinely committed to exposing and investigating the CIA,
Yeah.
this is a good case to start, and for understanding CIA corruption. So if they can't see something is wrong here, where would they see? They wouldn't see it anywhere. I mean, if something is wrong, I mean, the evidence is so overwhelming in this case that A, Castellaro was murdered, that B, there are these covert CIA networks. As you say, in a lot of cases, I think they are carrying out White House policy, but they may sometimes go off on their own and do criminal activities on their own. But there's just so much evidence of it. There's books written, like on the Nugenhan Bank. I mean, in the years after Castellaro died, there were books published on the Nugenhan Bank. One was by Jonathan Whitney, a Wall Street reporter that I have. There was a book in 2015 published by a writer, I think Butt is his last name, who tracked down Michael Hahn because Frank Nugen committed suicide. The Nugenhan Bank ultimately collapsed, and its corruption was exposed, and it was exposed in the Australian Parliamentary Commission, and Frank Nugen committed suicide, but Michael Hahn somehow escaped and never faced any prison time. We're talking about massive criminal activity, including huge drug laundering operations, and he escaped, and he used the same Social Security number, miraculously, back in the United States. So he could have been easily tracked. Obviously, somebody was protecting him, and he went into the arms business, I think somewhere in Idaho, and he's still there. And he'd never faced any prosecution. The government could easily find him because he never changed his Social Security number.
I could find him. If he's using the same social, I could find him.
I mean, there's something wrong here, and this has been exposed already. So, like a lot of what Castellaro, maybe it was fresh in the '90s, but now there've been books written about this stuff, and BCCI was exposed, the CIA front. So,
wait! Covert Action Magazine has that FOIA document about Bill Weld.
About what?
William Weld.
Oh yeah.
Describe that.
I can't remember.
Don't you remember he was the Department of Justice sent them a letter saying, "Hey, we want you to go sell this software." They mentioned Khashoggi, I think, in this thing, to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, and walk it through Credit Suisse like you did last time.
I see. Yeah.
You're not familiar with that?
So, no, not specifically, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Okay, I might be getting the name wrong. It was William Weld who ran for president in the Libertarian Party against Clinton back in 2016. And this document came out, and then it disappeared. And the only place you could find it now is on covertactionmagazine.com.
Okay.
Yeah. So the stuff is out there, like you said.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know how, if he's, I don't know. And, there are question marks. I mean, what we've seen in this time is that the CIA has enormous budgets. They've infiltrated the mainstream media. That was exposed a long time ago. But I think they've increasingly targeted alternative media. And that's why these kind of stories are either not picked up, or these kind of investigations are not carried out, or there may be these kind of whitewashes where you have these alternative outlets or podcasters who are actually, CIA just trying to kind of hoodwink the public, and they have this veneer of being like countercultural type operation, but really they're there to censor the truth or to malign whistleblowers.
Now, the thing is, there's no doubt that when you mention how this is also well documented, I don't think there could be any dispute that the cause of the death of Danny Castellaro originates in the investigation of the INSLAW PROMIS software. Agreed?
I agree, yeah.
Okay, then how can you make such a bold move here? How can you make such a bold move to do this documentary and smear Hamilton on such a thinly substance with this bowling alley stuff? That's such a bold move to try and make that attempt. Are guys like Christian Hansen, do they have the weight to pull that off?
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's rude because he got information from Hamilton. Right. Like, he kind of sold his own sources under the bus. I mean, what kind of journalist does that? When I'm doing an investigation of something, I'm really grateful If anybody's trying to help my investigation or providing me information or serving as a source for an article, it's my responsibility to protect them, not to reveal their identity if they don't want that, and not to throw them under a bus. So it's a complete breach of journalistic ethics. And I mean, no, he doesn't pull it off because he doesn't have the same credential. He's a young guy. He's not a historian. He's not even a journalist. He was a photographer. He's not an experienced investigator. I mean, Hamilton is. Osborne is. There are professionals who write books. They know how to marshal together evidence and to make arguments. He doesn't have those credentials, and he doesn't even really present good evidence for his claims, like we've been discussing. Just because a researcher is going to rely on all kinds of different sources. If one particular source leads him down a dead end, that doesn't discredit the researcher. But that's what he does with this bowling alley woman. So that in itself is really irrelevant. If that source was truly one of Hamilton's source and misled him, that doesn't mean anything. Hamilton has many different sources, and that's on the source. So that was a bad source. So he proved nothing, and he presents no new evidence in the case that would make us rethink it. And he ignores all kinds of evidence, including evidence related to Castellaro's murder or death that he doesn't discuss, including like the maid who was interviewed and what she said. He doesn't discuss that. And all kinds of crime scene evidence that was reported even on Unsolved Mysteries, as I said, was a very good show. It used to be my favorite show as a kid with Robert Stack. And they did an episode on the Castellaro murder, and they did a good job. They interviewed a lot of people, and they made it clear that there was foul play. But he's not even, going at their level. And this was like 20, 30 years ago that episode aired. He didn't draw on a lot that was in that episode. That's publicly available information. He's basically suppressing in his film. And then there's all the massive evidence that Castellaro was unearthing and that we know about the Octopus, whether it's related to like Nuganhan Bank is not discussed in the film at all. BCCI. So much of what we know about whether it's this coup in Australia, whether it's related to Iran-Contra and the involvement of the Kuwaiti royal family, these checks that materialized that Castellaro had and was going to be passing the Kerry Committee about illicit arms deal. I mean, this is all hard evidence about the operations of this Octopus, which is not just made up. And he's not presenting that information that is in the public record. So it's a dishonest film in that regard.
Jeremy Kuzmarov, covertactionmagazine.com. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show here and clearing this stuff up. People can check out Jeremy's book, Warmonger, How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Launched the U.S. Trajectory from Bush 2 to Biden. Also, too, if you want to see that scanned document I was telling you about, it's in Covert Action Magazine, and it's in an article from 2021 called Cam Exclusive, CIA Adapts Database Software Called PROMIS with Backdoor Cyber Espionage by Jack Calhoun.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that was before I became the managing editor, so yeah, but I know Calhoun's work is usually very good. So.
Well, go back in your archives and check this out. It's a letter to William...
I will, yeah.
It's great. It's a letter to William F. Weld. Walk through the Credit Suisse National Commercial Bank like you did last time. And it's sent to him when he was working for the U.S. Attorney at the time, and it was sent to him by the U.S. Assistant Attorney General Civil Rights Division. What the hell are they doing laundering money for PROMIS? The Civil Rights Division? You can't. This is just so crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's so brazen. A lot of the corruption we've seen is just so brazen. That's why we need to call out these kind of films, and we need to put a stop to this and restore some integrity in our public institutions.
Well, hopefully everybody involved in all this, if you have clean hands, let's all come out and talk in the open about, what our opinions are. If we have differences of opinions or whatever, let's just talk about it and get out there and talk about it and see what's going on here with the situation here. We've been talking to Jeremy Kuzmarov from the covertactionmagazine.com. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, sir.